The following device is called the Leap Motion. The Leap Motion is a hand tracking device that was released in 2013. It has two infrared cameras and three LEDs spaced on either side and between the cameras to prevent overlaps. Now, the minimum system requirements for in order to use the Leap Motion is to have Windows 7 or a higher version or Mac OS 10.7. It is also necessary to have an AMD Phenom 2 or Intel Core i3, i5, i7 processor, 2 gigabytes of RAM, and a 2.0 USB port. Now, something that is very important to take into account when using the Leap Motion is the interaction zone. This is important because, for example, something interesting is that the Leap Motion can be used uh, with a VR headset. For example, you can mount the Leap Motion in front of your VR headset, and this way you can use the VR headset and at the same time detect or hand track your hands. This could be an interesting way that is worth investigating more because it is an alternative for the controls that the VR headsets nowadays have. Another thing is why is it is important to understand the interaction zone? Because just like I was saying that we can use it with the VR headset, we can also, as it appears in the image, we can also use the Leap Motion by simply putting it on any desk. Now, it is important to take into account so that the Leap Motion tracks correctly our hands, uh, to take into account that the um, recommended depth between the distance between your hands and the Leap Motion is about 60 centimeters, when 80 centimeters would be the maximum. Now, another thing that you have to take into account is that um, the although the Leap Motion is a hand tracking device, it also has its limitations. So some complex movements with our hands, the Leap Motion won't be able to detect with such precision. So we have to take into account that yes, it can hand track your hand, of course, but if you want to have a very precise hand tracking, you will need another device because the Leap Motion is not extremely precise. For example, if we wanted to make a software or an application for surgeons, medics that we want to make a surgery simulator, I don't think the Leap Motion would be a good idea because it is not so precise, uh, but the Leap Motion can be used for other things that don't require such precision. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to connect a Leap Motion into your computer. Now it's fairly simple. As you can see, here's the Leap Motion and it only has one entry. Now this cable over here, as you can see, this cable entry corresponds to this port. So it's fairly simple. I will connect it. And it's important that you always connect this cable from to the Leap Motion before connecting the USB to the computer.
Once you have connected the Leap Motion into your computer, you will see how this green light will be lit and these three red lights will be lit. In the camera, they look like they're white, but they are actually red. So if your Leap Motion has these lights on, you're all ready to go.
Now, once you've successfully connected your Leap Motion, the first thing that you want to make sure is that you have two things installed. The first thing is the SDK for Windows, in my case, but if you're using Mac, well, of course, you're going to have to install the Mac SDK. And the second thing that you're going to need is that you need a package for the Leap Motion. To do this, simply go into Google and go into developer.leapmotion.com. Once you're in the web page, go to develop and then select Unity. And this window will appear. The first thing that we want to make sure, as I was saying, is to download Leapmotion Orion, which is the SDK. This will take you into this other web page where you will have to choose between these two products. In my case, we're using Leap Motion Controller, so let's select this one. And then, as you can see, here is the SDK. You can download it whether for Windows, Mac, or Linux. As I was saying before, in my case, I'm using Windows, so I'm simply going to click download. Since I've already downloaded the SDK, I won't click it again. But once you click in download, two things will happen. If you don't have an account yet, if you're not yet registered, the web page will ask you to register. But if you already have an account, simply sign in. That's important to take into account. Once you've downloaded the SDK, it will download a zip, and inside the zip, you will have the following folder, and you're going to simply click in the installer. Okay, now let's head back into the first window. And the next thing that we're going to do is download the Unity package. We're going to click here. Let's give it a moment to finish loading. Okay, and as you can see, it downloaded another zip. If I open this zip, you can see that it contains a folder. If I double click it, we have 3 Unity packages. Now, once we've done this, we can head back into Unity. Before we import the Unity package, I wanted to show you that once you've downloaded the SDK, this icon will appear. If you double click, you will open this window. In this window, there's something that's very useful called the troubleshooting tab. If you go into here, you will find this option, Diagnostic Visualizer. If you click it, you can see that it opened this window, and well, you can see me and my hands, and you can see how the Leap Motion is detecting my hands. This is a useful tool uh, so that we make sure that the Leap Motion is working correctly. In case that the Leap Motion is not detecting your hands correctly, uh, the first thing that you can check is make sure that the Leap Motion is is in the correct position. Normally, you want the yellow, the green light in the device to be pointing towards you. This will mean that the cable, the entry of the cable, will be on your left side. because if you change the position, well, actually it's detecting it correctly. So just in case that you're having problems having it in that position, you can always change the position of the leap motion. The next thing, in case the leap motion is not working properly, is make sure that the cameras of the leap motion, the the surface, is clean. For example, that it doesn't have fingerprints or stuff like that. And the third thing that you can do, just in case none of these things help, is if we close this window, there's this option called Recalibrate Device. Simply click it and it will open this window which will guide you on the process of recalibration. In this case I don't need that, so I'm going to close it, and I'm going to close this window as well. Okay, now we can start configuring our Unity scene. The first thing that I'm going to do is import my Unity package, and I can go to Assets, then Import Package. In this case it's a custom package, and I'm going to select the core Unity package. Let's open the Unity package, let's click Import, let's give Unity a second, wait for it to finish importing. Okay, perfect. Now Unity has finished importing our Unity package, and as you can see it has created this folder called plugins. If I double click, we can see that we have the Leap Motion folder. Double click the core folder, and inside this folder we can see that there are a lot of options. But there's another thing, and if we go into the console we can see that we have two errors. The type or namespace name spatial tracking does not exist in the namespace Unity engine. In order to fix this error, you will have to go into Window, then select the Package Manager, and Unity will open this window. And let's head into not show only the packages that are in my project, but in the Unity registry. I will scroll all the way down and find the XR plugin management. I will select it, then I will go press this button called install. Let's wait for Unity to finish installing. Okay, now that it's finished installing, we can see that the errors have disappeared. So, seems like everything is in order. Now, let's head over into our assets. Simply go into, once again, plugins, Leap Motion, core. Then we want to go into examples. And as you can see, there are a lot of options. In my case, I'm not interested in the VR because I'm actually not using a VR headset for this example. So I'm going to select the desktop. Double click, and as you can see, I have my Unity scene with these game objects uh, that are made, there are hands made of out of capsules. If I hit play and I put my hands on the Leap Motion, we can see that it is working correctly. It's detecting my hands perfectly. So once we have finished configuring our Leap Motion project, I can show you real quick a very simple way of creating some functionality with the Leap Motion. Let's stop playing, and I'm going to create real quick a folder called custom scripts, and I'm going to create a C# script I'm going to call this the hand manager. Hand manager. And what I want to do right now is create a simple script that will help me grab an object using the hand gestures. A hand gesture is a good way to work with the lip motion. For example, we can use different gestures, hand gestures, for different commands. For example, if I want to move an object, I can have a specific um, gesture. For example, I'm going to open the diagnostic visualizer so that I can explain this better. For example, a hand gesture will be something like this. This is a very common gesture because something that's really important that you take into account is that the lip motion, yes, it does detect your hand, but it's not that precise. So if you make a very complex gesture with your hand, it might happen that the lip motion won't be able to detect it correctly. So when we work with the lip motion, with hand gestures specifically, you have to make sure that the hand gesture is simple. For example, something to take into account is that if you put your hands like this, the lip motion will stop detecting the upper hand. And things like that that you have to keep in mind. So in my case, for this exercise, I will make a simple gesture. This one. Okay? Now let's head back into Unity and see how we can make a simple script that can detect what gesture we are doing. As you can see, I have my Unity's my script open, and what I want to do is, mm, I'm sorry, uh, I'm going to use the right hand. As you can see, if I select the hand model, sorry, I can go to my cancel hand left. Actually, I'm rigid round hand left and my right. I'm interested in this one. And let's go into thumb, and I'm interested on the last bone. I will create an empty game object called um, thumb position, and I will put it as a child of bone 3 of my thumb. I will reset the position so that it's exactly on on the bones position. Let's change the thumb to... Actually, I could... No, I'm going to keep using this one. Let me position it. There we go. I don't know why it's not letting me change the transform from global to local. Okay, it doesn't matter. Let's put it as a child. And the next thing that we want to do is create, let's find our index finger, and we're going to do the same thing. We want that actually I can simply use my bone, and I can delete this game object. So I will simply use the bones. I think that will be easier. Okay, now in my script I want to detect the distance between these two fingers. So let's head over into our script, and I'm going to create a public game object called um, position A. And then I'm going to create another public game object called position B. Sorry. Okay, and I want to uh, see what's the distance between these two positions. Remember that in Unity there's a function called in vector3 I think that can give us that information. So I will head into my void update function and I will say, hey, my distance uh, will be equals to my vector3 dot distance, and I will give the position a. Actually, this is not going to be a game object. This will be a transform. Transform. This way, we can simply give position b, and it's actually position. Position. There we go. Okay, we are now getting our distance. So we can let's print what's the distance. 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 Let's see what's the distance between these two fingers once we make the gesture. Let's hit play. Okay, we can see my two hands. Let's go. Oh, of course, it's not doing anything because I haven't assigned the script. So I'm going to create this empty game object, hand manager game object. I'm going to assign this script and it's going to ask me for the two positions. In this case, it's my last thumb bone and my index's last bone as well. Okay, now we can hit play. Now it should be printing. Let's clear this. And it's still not doing anything. Let's see what's happening. Hand manager. Oh, it's actually it should be working actually. Retelling debug log distance. Let's try it again. Show me. Okay, here it is. I had it disabled. Let's collapse. Okay. If I put them close together, it's giving me 0.01213 approximately. If I'm not touching, if I'm not doing the gesture, the value should be around 0.09, 0.08, 0.06. I think that in this position, we could call this a valid gesture. 0.02, 0.02. Okay, let's try a value like that. We can always create a variable called a float, type float, that it's called um, valid distance, valid gesture distance, for example. And we can tell here in the void object function if valid gesture distance is less than equal to um, if distance, I'm sorry, it's actually all the way around. If distance is less than equal to um, if distance less than equal to distance, we want to do an action. Do perform action. Perform action. Okay. Now let's head back into Unity, let it compile the code. Let's see if this, oh, let's change the valid distance. We saw that the distance when doing the gesture was about 0.02135. So let's see if 0.27 maybe, something like that. Let's see if that works. I'm going to hit play, and if we see the perform action on the console, it should be working. Okay, we can see it's going to be lost with all of this, so let's do something. Let's stop the printing to console this the distance and simply wait for the perform action message. I'm going to hit play, and if I, okay, we can see that it's working. If I have my gesture like this, it won't be doing anything, but if I put it like this, it will be detecting. So every time I do this, I can do a specific action. What action? It actually depends on you. But, well, this was a short demonstration so that you can see one way to start using the Leap Motion inside of Unity. I hope this video helped, and, well, see you on the next video.